Hi, Rachel. How
Hi,
are you?
good. How are you doing?
I'm good.
So I would love for you to just give us a nice introduction about, who you are and a little bit more about your platform.
For those who don't know me, my name is Shane. I was a professional ballet dancer for 12 years, danced with the Vienna State Opera, San Francisco Ballet, and then finished up my career with Queensland Ballet here in Australia. When I retired, I moved into personal training and kind of started coaching dancers a couple of years after starting as a personal trainer. And then during the pandemic, did a lot of stuff online because everything was shut down. Obviously, we couldn't work face to face. And then launched an adult ballet studio. So I worked pretty much only with adults for a couple of years. And now I run Athletistry, which is like an online coaching for dancers of all ages and those who are looking to improve, but not just from a dance perspective, but also from a strength and conditioning perspective as well, to help dancers stay strong and healthy and injury free for as long as possible.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you just do it all. You do a lot and it's awesome. And I've been loving following your platform and also the shifts that you've made, which I kind of want to get into a little bit just from your professional career and then working with just adults and then really what you've come to now. So I'd love to know, how has your relationship with dance shifted?
I think everyone who has a career in dance has that a big shift that happens at some point because they go from living the dance life, waking up, taking class, rehearsing, performing to what do I do now? What's my next thing when that career ends? And it's often not an end that you're expecting. Oftentimes it happens when you least expect it, right? Like there's for me it was not like, oh, I'm going to retire now, I'm done. It was an unexpected finish. So I went through this process of kind of soul searching, like what do I want to do now? Because for me it was actually not a happy ending to my career. I was not ready to finish, but circumstances led me to that point. And so for me, it was like, what do I want to do? How can I continue to still move and still have an impact in something that I haven't necessarily trained for many years, because ballet takes so many years out of your life. Like if you think about, I was 30 when I retired, and started dancing at 5. So that's 25 years of work that all of a sudden now I can't utilize that in a performance capacity anymore. So for me, it was okay. I want to learn more about my body and what I've been utilizing as my tool for so many years. And so personal training was quick enough because it wasn't going to be a university degree where I was going studying for many years, still had a family to support, but was going to give me the information and the understanding to know how to help people, how to continue to work with the body, and then also to help people to work with their own bodies to understand better. So I went into personal training, and for a year it was I didn't work with dancers at all. I only did kind of the general population training. And I think for me that was a really eye-opening process, because as dancers we have almost like this natural understanding of the body and how things work because of how often we're working with our bodies. But as non-dancers, there's often this lack of awareness of the self and how you move and what's going on. So that almost was like the ultimate training of how do I now take this back to dancers and say, okay, you have this intuitive understanding of what's going on, but let's actually help you to understand why that's working and what's actually happening and how that can connect and how that can help you to move better and understand your body better. So for me, it was almost like now, post dance career, I understood so much more about dance than I did when I was dancing because of the experience that I had working with non-dancers. And I thought, okay, well now I have to take this and I have to help dancers to stay strong and stay healthy, because my career ended with knee injuries. And so a lot of the health professionals that I was working with were basically saying, oh, you're never going to have the ability to get rid of this. You're just going to have to keep taking anti-inflammatories if you want to get through the pain. And like, I know now that that's ridiculous. There was so much more that I could have been doing at the time, but the knowledge just wasn't there. No one was helping anybody. So that kind of became my mission, to take my experience from dance and say, look, you don't have to have this negative outcome. You can have a positive one. Let's help you get there.
I love that. And in some strange ways, I just feel like my path was a little bit similar in regards to transitioning into this career that is so, or was so, not necessarily utilized in the dance world in regards to nutrition. And then having to, still with what I have to do now, there's some research that, is emerging on dancers when it comes to learning, what specific nutrients they benefit from, and macronutrient balances and so forth. But that research is so new. You know what I mean? I've been a dietitian for 10 years now, and I've been working with dancers for 10 years. And so much of what I've had to really learn has been built off of the athletic community, not necessarily off of the dance community. But one thing that you talk about that I think is so interesting, because you really got the point across really well, and it's something I try to explain to dancers. A lot of the work that I do as a dietitian who has a focus in intuitive eating, right, which is that learning about body attunement and those cues, I always try to explain how dancers have such a strong sense of body attunement, but when it comes to these cues, especially like hunger cues, they so often go unnoticed for dancers, and dancers will either just, it doesn't always have to be intentionally ignoring them. I think disordered eating gets a lot of airtime right now for dancers, but that's not always the case. It could also just be busy and physically active schedules. So I think it was really interesting how you discussed that dancers do have this extreme level of body attunement. And then I'm curious to hear from you, are there challenges in that as well in regards to what you've had to, in how you teach dancers? I know that they are very body aware, but what I've experienced are challenges in regards to intuitive cues of knowing how to feel the body.
That is something obviously that comes up, especially in a conditioning sense, that because in a ballet class, we often have this mentality of, I just have to keep pushing. I just have to keep working. Like, there's no time to rest. Like, next combination, let's just go, go, go. When you say to a dancer, okay, let's take a minute rest between sets, they're like, what do you mean? I can rest now? This is weird. I want to keep moving. And so they kind of feel like inside themselves, like they're not doing enough work. And then they wake up the next morning like, oh, that was really hard. I didn't realize how much I had done. And I think that is probably something as well that I think, with dance science and the kind of marriage of dance science and traditional dance training over the coming years, maybe even in the next 10 years, we'll start to see the traditional ballet class start to change a little bit in the way that it's designed, because we'll start to understand the condition, the basis of periodization for exercise, and that will come more into the dance environment. We'll say, hey, look, you don't need to push for 7 minutes for one combination when you could do 5 or 6 1-minute combinations and actually get a better result out of it, right? I think there will start to, and even in companies, I think we'll start to see more and more sports strength and conditioning exercise physiologists, more dietitians, more people who are helping dancers to understand how their body works. Which, it's interesting also working just in a functional movement sense with dancers, because from such a very young age, our natural functional movements are kind of trained out of us. Like, if you think about a squat, dancers really struggle generally with doing squats, because when we do a plie, we don't really get much hip hinge. Like, we keep the body perfectly upright, we're in a turned down position. And so oftentimes when I'll get a dancer to just do a parallel squat, they almost can't do it. They don't know how to let their body come forward naturally in relation to their shins, and it's very difficult. And so a lot of also what I will do with dancers is say, okay, well, you understand how your body works for dance, but let's actually make you functionally healthy as well, so that you're not just a healthy dancer, but a healthy overall person, and then move forward with that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And again, so many parallels with the work that I do as a dietitian for dancers, because there's this really the work that I do, it integrates this idea of learning how to get back to our abilities of fueling our bodies intuitively, which, and I say get back to that because we're all born intuitive eaters, don't have all of that negative necessarily messaging from diet culture. That's kind of just, you know, the shoulds and the should nots, for example. So with dance, what I end up having to do is really integrate this idea of, well, when we're in the studio, we have to have a more proactive approach, because you are, I mean, you're moving your body at a level that parallels that of an athlete, right? So there has to be a proactive approach to nutrition, but how can we also integrate this intuitive approach that doesn't feel restrictive, that doesn't feel confined? And very similar to what you're saying in regards to just learning, you know, okay, well, this is how we're fueling as dancers, but then how do we also integrate that that balance so that we can also move through life and enjoy, you know, the cultural aspects of food and the socialization around food, and not only have food be this aspect for physical performance, because it does play such an important role in that, but it's not necessarily the only role. So I think that a lot of what you're saying just makes so much sense, and it really just parallels, and I agree. Hopefully over this, you know, over the years, we just start to see more and more of this integration with dance science, because just seeing the work that you do with dancers and how you are truly helping them embody all aspects of their training and really utilizing that to fine tune their skills is just truly fascinating. Now, I know you briefly mentioned that you struggled with an injury when you were dancing. I'm curious, maybe that was the point, or maybe there was another point, but did you ever have a point where you started to connect nutrition or food with your training?
After I finished dancing. And I think a lot of that had to do, unfortunately, with the schedules that we had to keep as dancers, right? Like a lot of the time, you know, it was class and then into rehearsal, and then maybe you had 30 minutes for a lunch break, and then back into more rehearsals, and then, you know, by the time you got home, you maybe didn't want to eat dinner. You were tired. It didn't feel right for you, and then, you know, you'd get to 9 o'clock at night, and it's like, oh, now I'm hungry. So then you'd go and you'd have something, and it never felt like there was any consistency, but the focus was never put on food either from any. Like no one ever said, hey, you need to eat well to sustain your body. It was just like, you know, just eat because you're hungry, and go and do what you want, right? And so you know, if that ended up being a whole packet of cookies and a chocolate bar at 10 o'clock at night, that's what you ended up doing, because that's what you had in the cupboard. And then, you know, on top of that, performance schedules would often get in the way of how you were eating and whatnot. So unfortunately for a lot of dancers, there's just not any guidance, or at least when I was dancing, there wasn't a lot of guidance around how to eat intuitively, right? Like how to take care of yourself. It was just whatever you can put in your body to get quick energy is pretty much what's going to end up happening. It started towards the end of my career that people started to talk about it, and I remember them bringing a dietitian in and having a chat. But even at that, it was done in such a way that it was like, oh, okay, this is like our obligation to bring somebody in to talk with the dancers. And we were kind of forced to be there, and no one wanted to be there because we had a show that after that. Like if it wasn't done in a way that made us feel like we were being supported or that it was actually going to help us, it was like you have to sit through this half an hour talk with the dietitian because that's what we're right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I think if there had been more importance put on just, look, if you eat that's in a way that's going to support you and that's going to help your body to stay healthy, your career will last longer. You'll have the ability to actually make it through rehearsal without feeling like you're going to fall over. You know, you won't get as injured because your joints will actually have the nutrients that they need to repair in recovery, right? And I think a lot of that stuff it wasn't explained to us. Like they brought it into being about, oh, you know, don't drink so much alcohol. Like that was what it came down to. It's like, oh, you're drinking too much, and the company should stop drinking so much as a whole, like to the entire company. And I was like, okay, so you need to drink less, but we're up until 11 o'clock at night, and we need a way to come down at night. That seems to be the easiest way. And I'm not saying that is the easiest way. I'm just saying that tends to be the culture that develops in adult company life, right? So it's something that I think probably now is getting better. I mean, I'm not in the company space to know how well they're doing with that discussion, but I think it is definitely a challenge for dancers to know how to take care of themselves, because we're thrust into the world at a very young age. Like I was living on my own at 16. I know my wife was already living on her own in Europe at 14 and a half, 15. And so oftentimes you haven't learned the skills necessary to cook and take care of yourself and feed yourself well. And you just kind of, oh, that person's doing that. Okay, I'll do that. Or you don't have the money necessarily either to eat the way that you should be eating too. So I think there's a lot of variables that are a challenge in that space for dancers these days.
Absolutely. And honestly, all of those challenges are still very prominent in regards to lack of education, dancers being put into pre-professional or even professional worlds very young, not living with their families, living in dorms with a zillion other dancers who either have some questionable habits around food, and then, of course, accessibility from a financial standpoint, from an environment standpoint, when you're going on tour and you're young and you don't necessarily know how to fuel your body. So all of those challenges still come into play. And, as you mentioned earlier, hopefully the industry as a whole will just continue to shift and move forward. I always say also social media can be a major detriment, but it can actually also be a major benefit in the sense of, dietitians like myself, accounts like yours, just having access, as long as dancers are following accounts that are credible sources, whether it's for like yourself, for training, like myself, for food and nutrition, then there's definitely information out there. It's just there's a lot of information out there and it could often be also really confusing. But I'm curious to hear from you, because a lot of dancers do struggle with that hyper-focused mindset. I notice this with my clients, with the younger dancers mainly, that aren't necessarily yet at that company level, but they just want to do everything in their power to get there. So they tend to hyper-focus on just their training in the studio. So I'm curious to hear from you about how you promote balance, both from a cross-training perspective, but just also from a life perspective.
I think it is important to have an outlet. You need to have something that is not just ballet, right? Like if that's your let's say your passion, what you want to achieve, and especially as a young student, if you're wanting to make it a ballet dancer, there's going to be a lot of time and effort that's put into that, and it has to be that way. Like you can't get away from that. I think oftentimes, especially in many of the schools that I work with, there's too much time being put in. So I'm finding that a lot of students are doing 40, 50, 60-hour weeks, which in my opinion is too much. As a professional dancer, we didn't do that much time in the studio. So to ask 14, 15, 16-year-old children to do that is almost too much, right? Like it's almost negligent in my opinion. But I think there does have to be an outlet of some sort, right? And for me, like my personal outlet when I was dancing ballet, I loved to do ballroom. So like I would go on the weekends and I would just dance, and it was fun, right? Like there was no stress put on it. It was not to reach a career in ballroom or anything. It was just, hey, let's go socialize and have fun and go out. So for me, that was something I did. But for everyone, it could be something different. I know, like in San Francisco Ballet, a lot of the dancers played golf, or they had other things that they would go and do, bike riding or something. It can still be active. I think we also have this fear of, we don't want to do too much, but you can still stay active and have something that's not related to dance, and that's going to create balance in your life. But even if it's something learning based, right? Like if you want to learn a new skill, if you want to learn even something that's not related to the arts, something in the sciences or anything, read a book, pick up something that's going to give you a moment's respite from whatever it is that you're so hyper focused on in the studio. Go and see a movie. It's okay. It's not going to be the end of the world to spend a few hours having a little bit of relaxed time every now and then. It'll actually probably do you some good, because I think what people sometimes forget is that dance, as much as it is very technical, as much as it is very much a physical effort, it's also creative. It's a creative process. And anytime that you want to do something creative, you need to have kind of like dead time where you're not doing anything. because the brain needs to fully relax and get into that repair mode in order to allow yourself to be creative. And so if you're always going, if you're never stopping, you're never taking that time to relax, you're actually stopping yourself from reaching your creative potential. So the more time that you take, potentially you're giving yourself that moment for your brain to say, oh, now I can integrate that movement, or now I understand what I was trying to get in class today. And it may come at 3 o'clock in the morning when you wake up and now I get it, right? And it's those things that if you don't let yourself sleep, if you don't let yourself rest, if you don't give yourself the time to recover, you're not going to have those moments of kind of like those little light bulbs that go off, the epiphany moments that suddenly now you have the creativity spark again. You can go back in with more enthusiasm and more inspiration to create and work more.
So important for dancers who are listening to just hear your message with this, because we all know that self-doubt that trickles in, right, when we're not in the studio, and to both be reassured that there shouldn't necessarily be self-doubt, but that this could actually benefit you, this negative time, and how it can benefit your creative process. And one thing that I do talk about with dancers, is the discomfort that might be experienced in this moment, you know what I mean, of downtime. Because I think as dancers, especially for my, just fellow type A perfectionist mindset type dancers, it's hard for us to even consider the idea of downtime, right? Like doing nothing can feel actually really scary. And I think it also goes back to just having that, I say this word a lot, but that this proactive approach in regards to the ability to acknowledge, like, this is challenging, but reassuring and fact checking that this is going to benefit me. And exactly with what you explain, how it's going to benefit you is, how you can then either bring other life experiences into your creative process, or just utilize that time to literally process everything that's already happened.
Sometimes you'll find with dancers, like I'll work with them for a term and then they'll have a couple of weeks off where they'll take some time off. When they come back, whatever they were working on in the last term is suddenly so much improved. And they haven't been working for those 2 weeks. It's not like they've been going and doing classes over the time off. They've actually just let their body relax. But when they come back into the studio after having that moment for the nervous system to kind of say, hey, look, I get this now. I understand what I'm supposed to do. I'm not fatigued anymore. I can actually lift my legs and do my movements. Then they're actually going to be in a better off place. And then because that movement has been integrated and the patterns have been taken to that place of what I would call unconscious competence, then they can move forward with that and kind of be like, okay, now I can do the next thing. I can take on that next step of learning, as opposed to just constantly working at the same, kind of grinding away at the same stone.
Yeah, fabulous. Honestly, such fabulous advice throughout this entire chat, Shane, really. Can you talk to us a little bit more about your work with Athletistry and how you are integrating your experience as a dancer, as a coach, also your work as an NLP coach? So I'm just curious to hear about the integration and how you bring all of this into this incredible platform.
I mean, what I do now, the majority of what I do is one-on-one coaching. I do have a platform with like programs that I put together to help with certain technical elements, or to create conditioning programs, or even workshops that I run. They're all available on our website. But the majority of what I do is one-on-one, because I think the most impact you can have with somebody is in that face-to-face one-on-one, whether it's by Zoom or actually in person, because you can break down some of the things that maybe are confusing for the dancer. You can help them with corrections that maybe they haven't understood in a group setting, to kind of dive into that and make it make more sense to them. Because I think a lot of the times what dancers struggle with is not that they don't want to improve. Right? I think everybody in the studio wants to get better, but when they get a correction, maybe it doesn't make sense the way that they wanted it, that the teacher wanted it to, or maybe it hasn't sunk in from a communication standpoint the way that the teacher was expecting it to, which kind of plays towards NLP, which NLP means stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming, and it was a method of using speech as a way to get a desired result. So helping people, not in like a manipulative way, like you're not supposed to use it in that way at all, although some people do, unfortunately, but to help people to understand through their main ways of processing information to better understand things. So for example, everybody has a different way of processing information, either visually, auditory, or kinesthetic. And you can use language with a person who's auditory that sounds more visual, and they're not going to be able to they're not going to understand what's going on. Like if I said to someone who's auditory, look at this, they're going to shut down. They're not going to get the information. Whereas if someone's auditory and I start to say, now listen to the way that I'm explaining this, they're going to have a much more close rapport with what I'm saying, and more likely that the corrections are going to go in. If someone's kinesthetic, you can't get them to just stand there and watch you, because they're going to shut down. So you have to actually move their body and let them feel it, and help them from a more hands-on perspective. So listening to people, right? Listening to students. I will get students to talk to me in the classroom because I need to hear the way that they express themselves. If someone doesn't talk, how are you going to know if they're visual, kinesthetic, or auditory? Like, you have to hear what their natural way of speech is. If they're using a lot of sound-based words, they're going to be more auditory. If they're using a lot of visual explanations, they're going to be more visual. If they're using a lot of movement, like they can't get the words out, and they're like this, and then obviously they're going to be more kinesthetic, right? So taking that into a coaching perspective and saying, okay, well, now I know how to reach you. Like, it's not just as simple as saying, okay, turn out, lift your legs, do this. Maybe sometimes it's watch my body and how I move. Look at me, like, see what I'm doing. Or going into a more in-depth explanation, right? Like there are some people who are what we call auditory digital, where just listening is not enough. They need to know all of the explanation possible about how that thing works. So you have to go into, okay, well, now the knee is going to do this, and then the quadricep is going to extend this. And then finally, because they can put all of those little pieces together in their mind from an auditory perspective, now they can make their body do it. And so for me, like, the coaching element of it is so much more than just, okay, we're getting you to do ballet. It's connecting with the person. It's helping them to understand how they connect with the world, even if I don't say any of this stuff to them. It's kind of under layer, but we're processing so much information on a daily basis, right? Like, even in the rooms we're in now, there's the hums of the electronics, the lights are on, we've got headphones on potentially, you've got both of us talking at you, you've got the dishwasher running in the other room, the kids are crying, there's music going, right? Like all of these things that our brain is trying to process. And if you think about consciously what's going on, it's taking those billions and billions and billions of inputs, and it's funneling them down to like 7. And so if something else is catching your attention and you're not able to focus because the person that's telling you the correction is not giving it to you in a way that your body or your mind is able to take on, you're going to focus on the light that's flickering on the ceiling because you're more visual. Or you're going to focus on the person across the room who's fidgeting and pulling at their leotard because you're more kinesthetic. And in those moments, you may have missed whatever the correction was. And it's not because you're a bad learner or you're not capable, or it's not that you can't do what the teacher's asking. It's just that they haven't found a way to connect with you as a student. And so for me, as a coach and as a teacher, I think, okay, well, my job is to find a way to connect with that student, and then to change my communication method to make them understand what it is that I want them to be able to do.
So fascinating. I think it's honestly something I haven't really learned much about, and just listening to you speak, it really shows to the testament of the value of one-on-one work, which I experience as well as a dietitian, whether it is over virtually or in person. I think there's so much value to be said about dancers that are able to get that individual work. Because as you said, every dancer is so individual in what they need and how they learn and how they process. Now, my final question for you before we wrap things up, it's a pretty looming question. And honestly, you've alluded to a lot of your answers throughout this chat, but I'll ask it anyway. How would you define what it means to be healthy?
I think you have to take it from the perspective of understanding yourself, which I think takes many years to do. I don't think it's something that you can just wake up tomorrow, especially if you're not in a place of being there yet, and say, okay, well, now today I'm healthy, right? Like, I think it's a practice. It's a daily practice, and it's not something that, like, once you find it, now you're there, right? And it's going to be different for each person, right? Like, some people are going to need more sleep. Some people are going to need to do more exercise. Some people are going to need to eat more, depending on their body composition. Right? Like all of those things are personal. I think what it really comes down to is finding what your personal state of well-being is, and utilizing the coaches and the professionals that are out there that can help you with each of those different parts of the puzzle, because there are so many different parts, right? Whether it's professional development, whether it is nutrition, whether it's exercise, whether it's your dance coach, whether it's even just understanding the relationships with the people in your life. Because we are social as humans. We're not just sitting in one place and being alone and locking ourselves off. And you know, if everything is great, but your social relationships are bad, you're going to be in one element of your life unhealthy. And so I think the healthy dancer really comes down to the healthy person. Really, like dance is like one element of that. Obviously, like what you do and how you approach that in the studio and your work. But your dance, being an art, is going to be a representation of who you are as a person. And you can't hide that. You can't fake that. Like your values and who you are as a person, the way you express yourself is going to come through in that movement. And so if you are struggling, if you're physically unwell, if you're not getting enough rest, if you're not taking care of your body, if your relationships are in a bad place, that will come through in the way that you express your art form. So I think more than healthy dancer, what it really comes down to is finding those elements. Maybe it's 5 elements, maybe it's 6 elements that in your life personally you identify as being healthy, and then rate yourself. Like, be honest with yourself and just say, hey, how are my relationships going at the moment? Am I good with my family? Am I good with my peers? Is everything going well? Am I taking care of my environment? Right? Is my home clean? Am I cleaning my clothes? Am I taking care of the space around me? Am I taking care of myself? Am I making sure that I'm getting enough rest? Am I exercising to make sure my muscles are healthy? Am I doing the dancing that I need to do? Right? All of those things, they all come in together to make this big pie of overall wellness for the individual, which again is going to look different to each person. So I think find those things. Find those elements that are going to help you individually, that you can identify or where you need to be. Use a coach to help you with that process as well, because sometimes it's hard to identify. Sometimes you think, oh, I'm great. And then you have a conversation with someone and you realize that there are things that actually need to be worked on. And then just constantly evaluate, right? Like, say to yourself, hey, how's everything going? Like, be honest. Just write it down. Like, was today a good day? What can I do tomorrow to make it better? Because my philosophy is, each day, it's not about reaching an ideal or a standard of perfection, but it's about each day doing a little bit better than you did the day before. That if you can say, you know what, yesterday I didn't make it to the gym the way that I wanted to, so tomorrow I'm going to make sure that I do that, and then doing it, right? Like, actually, when you make that promise to yourself, keeping that promise to yourself. And then every day, just a little bit of improvement. Find something for yourself that's going to help you to feel better and to stay stronger and to be happier and to create better relationships. And then overall wellness picture comes together.
Yeah, Shane, you've given such beautiful insight. Dancers who are listening, I can't even stress this enough, but you are an invaluable resource to dancers. And I will definitely be sharing or sending dancers your way. Actually, you work virtually with dancers, right? So you work with dancers worldwide. Well, thank you so much, Shane. This was really wonderful. Thanks, and we will definitely be in touch.